You're about to listen to a podcast from the Firearms Radio Network. For more, visit firearmsradio.net.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to This Week in Guns, brought to you by the Patriot Patch Company, VZ Grip, MAF Corporation, and FFL Payment Processing. This show offers commentary on the latest firearms industry news, information, and buzz. I'm your host, Matthew LaRosiere, and I'm joined today by the Rat Man. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. What do you got there?
Oh, I have the pistol from Halo, and I need to get my overshield.
Is that the overshield just below the magazine there?
Yeah, that's the overshield.
It's really good. Oh boy. No, that's a lot of fun. So I feel like it's not been that crazy of a news time, which is why it's taken us a while. But we do have we've managed to pile up a few interesting ones. I would just like to say I am wearing this shirt today. Do you ever forget that you're wearing like an offensive shirt when you're out?
I don't have offensive shirts.
Okay, so I'm wearing this shirt and it says "fully vaccinated by the blood of Jesus," which I am. And and I was driving my 64 Corvair, and the thing about the 64 Corvair is that you will immediately get a lot of boomer friends. So this old man comes up to the car and he's like, "Oh my God, what year is this?" And starts talking. And so I'm like, "Oh, he asked what motor it is." And I said, "Oh, I'll show you." And I get out and then I notice his demeanor just changes. And I'm like telling him about the car. And he keeps like looking at the car and then looking at my chest and looking back down. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? And then it wasn't until he left that I'm like, oh. I have to be sensitive to my boomer friends. You were there with me on the phone when that happened to me.
Yeah, I was shouting stupid stuff. I wish you would have heard it.
Yeah, no, you were in my earphone. But it was the funniest thing was right before we were talking. It was one of our friends was saying, "Oh, a car like that must be an absolute." And he used a different word. He's an unlimited chick magnet, and I'm like, ah. And then like immediately when he says that, the thing it's actually a magnet for old white men. Like that's what happened. It is great. If you are just thirsty for some boomer attention, get you a Chevy Corvair. I can like it is super effective. But speaking of that, geez, we got a lot to cover. Let's go first. Some good news for a change when it comes to, well, I don't know if it's good news or not. That'll be up for discussion when it comes to school safety. Okay. So this is Arkansas, which is a state, I believe it is in the American South. They have they passed a bill, and beginning this year, public schools and certain, charter schools or whatever will be required to give gun safety education to all students on a yearly basis. And of course, it'll vary depending on the year, the child age year. And it's very it could be as simple as an online course, video, or it does contemplate live fire activities, but for anything that actually involves hands-on firearms training, parental consent will be required. And of course, this is a Arkansas governor person who did the signing. And did they really look like that over in Arkansas?
Yes.
Okay, fascinating. Well, anyway, what do you think of the bill?
I think these sorts of things are on balance good, that if we are to tolerate some nature of the government, doing a gun control one way or the other, it might as well at least be one that has a demonstrable net benefit value, where there's something good that comes out of this at the end of the day, as opposed to your ordinary sorts of bans or your requirement for training be something that's put as a burden on you. There's a barrier between you and your thing. Whereas compared to half of the useless stuff that gets rammed in, especially at the state level school curricula, knowing how to be safe around a firearm isn't bad or stupid at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's like it's at least marginally, I feel, more societally useful than like abstinence mandatory
Right.
training. Right. I'm not sure if everybody got that. Did you get that in high school?
With regards to guns, yes.
No, abstinence only sex education.
No, I did not.
Oh, that's what ours was. Our sex ed was like a 1 week program, and they were like, no, the only option, there's only one safe option, is don't do it. And it was super
That'll
effective.
work great.
Yeah,
we were told not to touch guns in high school. It's dangerous. They had a guy from the Vietnam come in to tell us that they're dangerous and you can't touch them.
Yeah, every time he touches them, he pees.
I wish I was making this up.
I have never heard of anything like that.
Actually happened, yeah.
Like, don't touch it. It's
because
scary.
On the unit on drugs and bad stuff that the kids are doing these days, the guy had been a paramedic, and he had some stories that were believable, and then he would just tell you one where it's like, I do not think that had happened. Like, we're saving like multiple people from a car that was in the river, and then there was a lightning strike and they had to do CPR and then a defibrillate, and I'm like, that's incredible, man. But he also told us that guns, you can't touch them because they're no good because they hurt you.
That's true. Well, the honest utility here is that, people, because what's the biggest thing you'll hear as a gun owner from non-gun owners is, well, what are you going to do if some kids get in there? It's like, for one, what are they doing here? For two,
how did you get in here?
You bastard. But for two, obviously, if you have toddlers or whatever, you do have to take precautions, right? But once you're in school, I feel like, if you're at the point where you're reading, right, you should probably have been instructed at some point that there's these objects out there and they do have a certain inherent danger, and that you should like not touch them. And if you do touch them, don't touch them like that.
Not dissimilar to the oven or electricity or any other number of things in your house that, yeah, if a kid put it in their mouth and then did something funny with it, would probably hurt them. But so long as they're old enough to understand oven hot, they're old enough to understand don't touch or ask before you do. Yeah.
Gun danger, don't touch, and when you touch it, don't pull the cool lever. But yeah, no, we were somehow able to be told not to stick a fork into the electrical outlet.
Right. Of course, I have a good story about that. When I was a youngin', like this is like one of my earliest memories. I was like maybe 4 or 5. I was really young. I had just learned that, I was always told not to touch the jar that the candy was stored in the house because it's hot, right? It was hot and it'll burn you and only adults can touch it. Well, one day I got up on a chair and I found out that jar is not hot and you can just take a handful of candy straight out there. And I was like, man, I fucking showed them. I showed all of them. So it was like months after this point, we were riding go-karts. And, after we got done riding go-karts, in typical go-kart fashion, right? It'll only run if it's got like between 3/4 and 1/4 tank of gas. Because it's one of these fuel pumpless, gravity-fed Briggs carburetor setups that just never works, right? Drift around a corner, it dies. Don't drift around a corner, it dies. Stop too quickly, it dies. But we had driven it and got it below a 1/4 tank of gas. So every time it sloshes, it dies, and so it needed to be pushed back to the house. So everybody was helping push it, and then I was told the muffler's hot, don't touch it. And I'm like, oh idiot, there's candy in there, and I go and grab my hand all the way around the muffler. And I remember grabbing the muffler, and then the next thing I remember, I was in the kitchen getting my hand washed off and being chided for being an idiot. and I told them, like, you guys said not to touch the candy jar, huh? So I came clean about that. I was like,
I've had 2 experiences. Before this, the only experience I had went very well for me.
You guys said not to steal the candy, and guess what? I've been doing that and it's been fine.
That's good. Yeah, that is, I guess that does show that sometimes parents do fuck it up pretty good. I remember, it's one of those core memories because there was a very instant consequence, but I remember it's like one of my earliest memories where I'm sitting there in the playroom and I have a plastic fork and I'm just like looking at the fork and I look at the outlet and I remember just doing this And then one of my mom's friends just football tackles me. And so I didn't understand the mechanics of what I was doing or why it was wrong, but I knew that something very bad would happen. And so I just never did it again, and never thought about it until middle school, when the like punk kid who was, like he was a freak, he smoked weed. He's in middle school. People who smoke weed, they're freaks. Yeah. I remember he takes a paper clip, bends it into a U, and he's sitting, and he just goes, and then he goes to put it in, and then he stops himself, wraps his sweat, like pulls his sweater up, puts it in between the sweaters, and then puts it in. And I remember the whole time I'm watching him just like this, because I'm like, I know you're not supposed to do that, but me in 6th grade, I'm still not quite sure why. And I learned about fuses that day, and I learned about burning as well. It was funny. But yeah, all that to say, Arkansas, especially with y'all looking the way you do, it's quite likely that having better access to information is better. So good for you. Next up, and this is really disappointing, guys. So this is the NRA v. Now Bondi and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. This is a case that's been going on for a while. It's about Florida's 18 to 20 ban effectively on firearms, on a lot of firearms. Not so Florida goes a little bit beyond the federal questions on, simple handgun prohibition. Florida takes it a step beyond that in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas law, and that's what this lawsuit was attacking. The lawsuit came down before Bruin, right? And then we got Bruin, and the district court was like, no, it's okay, because back in the day, some people didn't have rights, and they pretty much only looked at Civil War era laws, which was stupid.
I wonder which people exactly.
Yeah. Well, and so then the 11th Circuit en banc snatches the case back and is like, oh, we got to look at this, right? And everyone thought, it's like, oh yeah, they on their own took it, right? So obviously the 11th Circuit is going to correct course and actually hold the law unconstitutional. So several years later, they come down with this real awful mess of an opinion. And it's 169 pages because there's a ton of dissenting and concurring opinions, right? And something along the lines of a dissental. But that your opinion is going to be rooted firmly in legal analysis when it starts with, on February 11th, 2017, Nicholas Cruz entered Sunrise Tactical Supply in Coral Springs, Florida. Cruz turned 18 years old 5 months earlier and could legally purchase a firearm in the state of Florida. It's like, no, this is how we know you're setting up to do an actual good application of the law and not just be a hack.
A bleeding heart about the whole entire thing.
Yeah. And so the amount of backflips that are done in this case to side with the government is outrageous. And it's frankly gotten to the point where the Florida defendants have said that if this gets appealed to the Supreme Court, they're going to drop their opposition and be like, yeah, no, we agree with the plaintiffs. None of the stuff that is in this lengthy preamble discussion has anything to do, is applicable at all to the analysis. They do finally actually limit themselves to the appropriate time period, which is laws up to and around the signing of the Constitution, right? They just ignore everything that is not helpful to them. They just straight up ignore all of the laws that required people under the age of 21, right? Sometimes as young as 16,
yep,
to keep a firearm. They just ignore these. And when they refer to them, they're like, oh, well, it doesn't actually count because sometimes in some of those laws, the parents would be required to actually make sure they had the gun if they couldn't afford it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
So they had to have a gun.
Yeah. No, yeah. Right. But yeah. So that's why you can do it. This is awful. This is terrible. It's really gross, and I'm really disappointed in the 11th Circuit. It's inexcusable. This is pure hackery. Like,
I mean, so I mean, to do a very quick and dirty legal analysis of this, would it be okay for the courts to see the people in any other of the amendments, specifically the ones in the Bill of Rights, and go, they mean people over 21, right?
Right.
They mean people over 25, right? I mean, could a state legislature draw the line wherever they wanted on the First Amendment? Like, well, yeah, you have a right to like protest and speak your mind, but like you should probably at least be 25 first,
right?
Like, because you're stupid if you're not 25 yet. Full. I'm sure they'd be full well knowing the founding fathers were really young when they started getting upset.
Yeah,
and so
it's
complete. I mean, really, the word for it is non-serious, right? No judge, I think, wants to be the one that feels that weight on their conscience, because, okay, not to psychoanalyze judges too much, but I'm sure that some they feel responsible for the outcomes of their decision, right? Because it's this whole rippling effect or what have you. And I don't think any of them that are sort of fence sitters on this question, legally speaking anyway, want to have that moral albatross tied around their neck. They don't want to be the one to have killed the bird or the school full of children or whatever in this analogy. And so they're going to say no, and then they're going to do all sorts of like hilariously contorted things to be able to say, actually this law is constitutional, when in reality, like, even the analogs being pointed to will be one where it's, you'd have punishment for having, if you wanted to be a kid and have this sort of gun, when in reality you'd be punished for not having enough ammo for a militarily useful arm. That's a great analog.
Yeah, it's a great analog for the plaintiffs, right? And they refuse to look at the militia acts, which are manifestly relevant to the wording of the Second Amendment, and they just refused to entertain them. That's not serious. It's like you said. I like the way you put it. It's fundamentally unserious. This is a decision that was written for a result, right? They got to their result and they reversed to get there. And when because they saw the militia acts, it was argued heavily, right? And when they saw that standing in the way, they were like, right, yeah, but that's not real.
Right. They reversed to get they reversed from their position to get to their arguments.
Right.
They thought it would be speed bumps in reverse, but instead it's like the ones at the parking lot where it's spiky on the other side. and they're just dragging every tire across these spikes.
But yeah, the fact that it's this many pages and there's this many different opinions. Well, I mean, one, this is common in en banc decisions because you have so many different minds, right?
Right.
Disagreeing. I will just say I'm very disappointed in this circuit. We had a lot of hope thinking that they would.
I mean, they voluntarily took it en banc just to go, yeah, no, you guys got it. No, you were right.
Yeah. It's
doing it en banc just to affirm like a voluntary, right? It's not like anybody asked them to take it en banc. The court takes it en banc on its own to affirm it.
Right.
And it's been a while since I looked at the original opinion, but I don't think
the original opinion was bad. The original opinion was really bad, and so that may have been like it expressly relied upon black codes, right? So that could have been reason enough to be like, hold on, wait, right? So that could have been why, and also, frankly, it could be that the judges weren't sure that where they were going to lie. It is really disappointing seeing the names that we do see on this, though. The dissenting opinions, though, are pretty straight on, where they're just like, "Dude, what are you doing?" like you're they're cherry picking little instances from certain states where it's like, "Oh, right, but you couldn't like you couldn't captain a ship until you were 18 in this one. And you couldn't, like, there were limitations on certain things at the founding era, but it's like just like now, where there's like you have to be 30 something to serve in, federal government in certain offices. That's kind of like what it was then, and like, because like you said, in the founding era, it's not that people didn't live as long; it's that a lot of people didn't live as long, right? So a lot of the names that we saw doing things just by averages, wound up being younger, and people worked at a fundamentally younger age than they do now. That's something that, how can you get around that? They were referencing contract law and treaties on contracts that just suggested, well, if it's a young adult, you may not be very wise to sign a contract with him. It's like, okay. You may not be very wise to sign a contract with a 95-year-old person either. Right? What does that mean, though?
These people aren't very wise, so they don't have gun rights. and other positions that would have been really popular with the 1920s fascists. Says, all we have to do is call them dumb?
Fascinating. But yeah, very disappointing. I think that this should be appealed. It will be very funny to see Florida drop its case in point. Be like,
Florida's like, we have decided Italy is a role. I mean, it's even shaped like Italy, right? It's like, we're changing sides. All right.
Florida goes, wait, who's winning?
Wait, we don't want to end up on bottom here.
Switching teams.
You see what they did to Germany last time? We're not ending up like that.
That's good. Oh, you know what else is good, guys? It is VZ Grips, Com Corporation's Sharp Bros Echelon. VZ Grips with the Sharp Bros Echelon Grip module. Whoa, that's really important. The Echelon grip. What is that? What is the Sharp Bros Echelon?
It's a Stig. Stig.
Ew. Okay. Let's look at something else. M-Lock rail covers and hand stops. Guys, there's a lot of good Florida-made stuff here on this site web. You can go check it out. And if you think these prices are low already, go ahead and put in promotional code THISWEEK15 for 15% off your odor. And let them know I sent you, and also ask them where the Draco grip is, and get really impatient and rude.
There's another thing to ask them. This actually just dropped. The orders are just coming in from HQ. You need to ask them to make a stippled A1 triangular handguards.
Oh, yeah. That would be pretty big. That would be pretty big.
That would be pretty interesting.
Yeah, do that. Do that, guys. VZGrips.com. Promotional code this week, 15. Speaking of dumb, stupid, this is I don't know if you guys were on Twitter recently. It's SIG decided to just
crash out.
Crash out. I've heard a lot of people saying that. But you just throw a tantrum basically in the middle of the town square while everyone's kind of watching awkwardly.
Nobody SIG standing there in the middle of town square. Nobody walked up to him. Nobody said anything. Nobody did anything to really provoke him. And they just start freaking.
Yeah, just starts smashing, waving both of his fists up and down, alternating, and screaming, "It ends today! It ends today!" And so what this basically is, for apropos of nothing, they're like, actually, our gun's really good, and it hasn't accidentally shooted nothing. And there was a community note on here, but I don't know what SIG did to get rid of it. But this is just a bunch of just dog shit. SIG, sorry, the truth about the P320.
It's some very, very, very interesting corporate doublespeak they do, where they pretend that all of the 320's problems that SIG had halfway admitted to,
right?
They pretend that didn't happen because they say that it's impossible to make a 320 fire without pulling the trigger. That's not actually true. In fact, they have offered a voluntary recall to fix that. And in fact, they promised to the U.S. military that they would take steps to address that after the U.S. military found and confirmed that the issue existed on 320s. And so SIG is pretending that that's not a real thing. And then they're standing behind a couple of lawsuits where people had SIGs go off unintentionally, where SIG managed to get a victory in these lawsuits on
technicality.
Either getting expert testimony in product defect cases, the standard for that expert testimony can be really high. So you can show a gun set up this way could cause the gun to fire uncommanded, right? An uncommanded discharge could happen with a gun set up this way. And you can show that the plaintiff's gun in that case was set up that way, but that's not enough evidence. The court's going to want to see that actual gun fire in some particular circumstance. And understanding how the 320's lock functions works together, and understanding how oftentimes poor the quality control on some of the parts that they get from India or Israel or whoever's making it cheapest that week, whichever company that they can source it from, this time around for this
Israel,
batch. Right?
It's totally made there.
But depending on where they get the parts cheapest this week,
Israel,
there's in some of these cases, there's even very good electron microscope pictures of the fact that there's sear surfaces that are rounded off on guns that are practically brand new, and that all it would take is a vibration or of just the right force and just the right direction that would allow the striker to be dropped. And of course, you'd still need something to defeat the striker the striker safety mechanism, but it doesn't have the traditional plunger style. So again, it can be defeated without the trigger being pulled.
Right.
And because of this, right, the 320 can fail, and you can show to the court that this is how it would fail, and this gun was set up such that it could have it happen.
Well, that's getting very deep into the weeds. That's getting very deep into the weeds to say that here, let me pull this back up. Basically, what Ivan's doing is just completely shitting on their rhetoric, which is they say, and this is such double-speaked, snake-tongue nonsense. Furthermore, lawsuits claiming the P320 is capable of firing without trigger being pulled have been dismissed. It's yes. You've also been found liable in lawsuits relating to that very same thing.
And they've also settled some out to the tunes of many millions of dollars.
Right. So this is just completely hilariously misleading. And then the end of this is really something. So we have anyway, I'll read the statement first and then we'll follow up. Industry take notice. What's happening today to Sig Sauer with the anti-gun mob and their lawfare tactics will happen tomorrow at another firearms manufacturer and then another. Today, for Sig Sauer, it ends. And it ends by them doing absolutely nothing.
Yes.
But mind you, Sig is the real victim here, right? Because Sig, who is actively developing a firearm in as fast and stupid a mechanism as possible, right? Literally taking a hammer fired weapon and trying to reverse force it into being striker fired. Then releasing that gun in a very underhanded way to almost lose money on it, to just get it out all over the country. Multiple people being actually injured by the results of their actions, right? They're the real victims. Don't worry about Glock getting sued in multiple states and localities across the country for no reason, just because their guns are popular, right? Because it accepts a switch, right? That's some of the biggest nonsense ever. The reason Glock switches existed are because Glocks are popular, not because Glocks are particularly easy to convert. So don't worry about them. Don't worry about cases like, Engage Armory and United Gun Shop, where they're just attacking normal gun sellers for being successful gun sellers. You need to look at SIG, because today they came for SIG and I said nothing because I'm not a cronyist asshole who sucks money from the taxpayer while injuring Americans. And tomorrow they'll come for me somehow.
It's really confounding logic. And I think really the only people I saw that were vibing with this is the diehard 320 guys, right? It's the it's very similar to the Kimber guys, where it's like Kimber has documented issues with their 1911s. However, Kimber has also made hundreds of thousands of good 1911s, right? They have lots of guns that are out there, high round count, that work good. But the people that have the good ones will sit there and say, no, the guns don't have any problems because mine's fine, which is a pretty serious category error.
Yeah.
Your gun is one of the good ones. Not all of them are good ones.
Well, look, so I think this is a perfect microcosm. Your reply to this post said, hey guys, here's an easy way to stand behind your product. Post the parts list and bills of materials from the entire production run of the P320, along with the change notices each time you revised a part. Come clean about how many times you've done stealth revisions to the P320. And you'd think people would be like, oh yeah, that's fair, right? Because if there's nothing wrong with it, why would they fuck with the parts?
I need to be careful about what I say to this, but the reason I asked that is I've talked to people who know something of an answer to this question, and the answer to the question is SIG doesn't know how many times it's been revised.
Right. Well, so then I like this one too. Also list country of origin per part, please. Made in India. Explain why they have, and then this guy, explain why they have not lost a court case. They have, with all these experts and all these videos that you're claiming proof of, they have not lost a court case. Okay. You mean like Glock never did it? Then,
Glock did have unsafe guns, and frankly, the Glock 40, the Glock nades, the Glocks and 40 caliber was more of an ammo problem than a Glock problem on its own. Sort of because you had the gun come out before the ammo was really available, and then people were letting the ammo a little more spicy than it should have been. But Glock almost immediately addressed the issue. And while Glock didn't exactly go and clean up the guns that were on the market, I've got a Gen 2 Glock 40 with the unsupported case head or whatever. Shot tons of 40 through that gun. Doesn't bulge cases. Doesn't have problems. Shot defensive 40 through it. Shot whatever you name it through it, and it's fine. So it's a little bit of a dissimilar situation to Glocks with ammo that's probably not safe to put in any 40 being put in the early Glocks that are particularly susceptible to this. It's just not the same situation as the 320 that fires on its own.
Dude, if the platforms used for military weapons, posting the filled bullet materials could run afoul of EAR restrictions.
Genius.
But so my point here is that so many people jumping bizarrely to SIG's defense, it's inexplicable. And the best part of it didn't end here, right? So not a great ratio, right? 5.1 million views, 2.7 K comments, and 22,000 likes, right? Not a great ratio. So what do they decide to do? Well, they have to double down. The truth continues, boys. Continues. By the way, if you're gonna go to bat and die on the hill for a gun, have it be one that looks good.
Yeah.
This shit's ugly.
Well, see, that raises another interesting question that I do want to point out, that when SIG has been marketing the 320 to the million different places it's marketed it, they've always described it as the most tested, most proven, most safe, most reliable, most advanced, most proven handgun that's ever existed. And that's why they made the 365 completely different inside. There is no reason the 365 couldn't have a 320 mechanism. There is zero reason. There is zero reason you couldn't have put the 320 mechanism in the 365. Why did they change it? Why would they change from the most proven, tested, reliable?
Ivan, case dismissed. One particular police officer admits that his P320 pistol can't discharge without a trigger pull. Case dismissed. Visit p320truth.com. This is so mealy-mouthed and disingenuous. So, yeah, why leave the domain available for the country where 320 parts are made? Then Brandon Herrera starts throwing up the federal documents detailing all of their shit. And
what does the 320.in go to?
Oh, but we'll check that in a second. The crash continues, and this is my favorite. So y'all didn't issue this exact statement on your website? We have confirmed that usually after multiple drops at certain angles and conditions, a potential discharge of the firearm.
No, that didn't happen.
No, we didn't. This is not related to the. No, this is not related to the current lawsuits, and these drops actually just caused the inertia to pull the trigger. So technically, the trigger has to be pulled for the gun to fire. This issue was fixed 7 years ago.
You know, the crazy thing is how they fixed that issue wasn't putting a trigger safety on the gun. It was just like increasing spring weight, so you just have to drop it harder.
7 years ago. This issue was fixed 7 years ago, dude.
And they rounded up all the guns that had the issue, right?
Yeah.
Well, they went and rounded up all of the replacement.
Yeah, they know. They picked them all up.
All the replacement parts that were out there, they rounded those up, right?
Yeah, no, there's none of those anymore.
They didn't like all of the parts they knew are bad. They didn't continue putting those in guns until those parts were depleted, right?
No, they just called back Israel and India. And Israel, who is known for their great metalworking capabilities. Yeah, they called them up and took care of it. But then my favorite thing, I just gave you guys, your video viewers, a little treat. Is just the rest of the gun industry has just decided to start chewing on them. We're like, here. I don't ever know if I can say this word on Twig. But Anderson comes out with the truth about the Anderson manufacturing St. Patrick's Day event. Where it's just like, this is just so funny. I'm in love with it. Still the worst Glock clone. Oh, that's our shooting buddy from the AK matches. He needs to work on his grammar. All right, but I'll delete that. So he dislikes me enough as it is. But we'll have it for the vid. Still the worst clone IMO. Okay, but yeah, so that's enough about that. What's up next? Oh yeah, this is a big one. The Supreme Court. This was the oral argument in the Smith & Wesson Brands versus Estados Unidos Mexicanos. Smith & Wesson Brands, by the way, having changed the name of its like trading company, like I think 4 times in the last 5 years. Well, I never know what to call it. For a minute, it was American Outdoor Brands Group.
Smith & Western.
Yeah, Smith Western. So I'm sure you guys know about this. We've talked about this many times. Mexico decides to sue a host of American gun companies and the idea here is that by them making guns, they're aiding and abetting people transferring guns to Mexico to then do a Grand Mexico with the gun. That's retarded. But of course, Smith & Wesson says, hey, look, there's a federal law, Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act, that says you literally can't bring these types of lawsuits. And the court below was like, yeah, what if I ignored you? And that's why this has gone on for this long and gone on to the Supreme Court. And I think there was a lot of interesting things that happened in this argument. I think it was actually a very eventful and important argument. I think that it definitely shaped the way the case will be decided. There's a couple things that were good. One, it was with Sotomayor, right? I believe so. Yeah, who said, well, because guns out there now have, I'm not talking about these guns, but what about these guns, with removable serial numbers?
Easily erasable serial numbers.
Erasable serial numbers. And I was just like, that was great. But it seemed clear that even the most progressive judges were like, they all got a couple of jabs in against Mexico, being like, are you serious? Yeah.
Are you just being silly?
Yeah, you really want you're a different country and you want to use, what are you doing? Like and like even the most polite questions for them were like, yeah, but like, how do they have a duty to you? And how are they aiding and abetting over there? And then my favorite part was when they were like, well, Smith & Wesson that makes firearms that are designed specifically specifically to like 4 criminal elements to use, and they listed like 3 different 1911s that just had Hispanic names, and I thought that was so solid. Like it was like the and by the way, the attorney for the Mexican government was the most shrill, just miserable sounding litigant. And this does actually make a difference, because judges will not want to hear your arguments if you cannot be listened to. And she had a horrible voice, and she's literally saying that no, they have there's a gun that the La Muerja del whatever, you know. And of course, the guy for Smith & Wesson comes up on rebuttal. He's like, to suggest that selling a gun with a Hispanic name in a country with tens of millions of Hispanic people is somehow designed to target Mexican criminal elements is insane. So, like, I just thought it was that funny that Smith & Wesson's shrill lawyer was doing a racism right there. The thing, because if you name a gun Hispanic, it's got to be for crime. Okay. What were you just saying? I just kind of talked over you.
No, it was Mexico's lawyer. You mean the shrill one?
Yeah, Mexico's lawyer was doing a racism. Smith & Wesson's lawyer was not doing any racisms.
As far as I'm concerned, the best outcome, I mean, everybody knows the direction this case is going to go, right? This one's not going to be a big surprise. It's just a matter of if it'll be unanimous, or 1 or 2 of the liberal judges will do something funny to give us something to laugh at in a dissent. But the broader implications of this case would be interesting to see, because this isn't, this certainly won't be dispositive for the sorts of cases that sort of were more bad here, right? The more bad PLACA violator case that we've seen, where states will say that you've broke some sort of our nuisance liability law, so we're going to bring some like obviously frivolous, obviously just brought to get around PLACA lawsuit. Right. You're just trying to violate the intent of PLACA while trying to pretend that they're clever, so clever as to avoid the actual text of PLACA.
Yeah,
but those sorts of cases,
mad when we do it to the NFA,
right? Those sorts of cases are certainly more pernicious, and we would like to have an answer that sort of gets rid of those. Mm-hmm. But this case may at least be somewhat informative to those in the end. If at the very least it says, PLACA exists. Congress passed this on purpose.
Did you know this law is real and it can hurt you?
Well, in fact, it ought to hurt the people who intentionally violate it more. But
yeah, no, there should be the fact that there's, if anything, if we're going to have a good Congress lizards, they need to add attorney's fees. We've talked about this many times before. But
then I'm thinking like fees plus. Can you do that? Can you can do that?
Yeah, you can do that. You can do that.
Like if you fail,
it would be considered odd, but you could do it.
If you fail in a PLACA challenge, you owe the gun company like fees times 3.
Yeah, treble fees. You just it's a type of punitive damage, and it's like if you bring a PLACA, you bring a PLACA violating lawsuit to try to create a windfall for yourself, you wind up creating a windfall for the gun companies.
You could make it even sillier, right? Hey, here we go. Let's sweeten the pot. If you lose a PLACA lawsuit against the company, you have to buy 50,000 firearms of that company's choosing from that company, and you have to equip your police officers with them.
Yeah.
The gun company gets to choose what these guns are. It has to be the state police. Keltec's over here. Keltec adopts a new business strategy of we are going to sell guns out the back door without background check, just so they can get sued. just so they can be like, here, I don't know, we found these in the back, a bunch of grindles.
P50, $1,000.
That would be funny.
Yeah, that would. But anyway, we'll be seeing how that's going. We're not going to be super surprised. It will be interesting, though, to read the opinions. Speaking of all that, guys, MAF Corporation, that's maf-arms.com. Guys, you need to go there. It's an important website. Spooky Rails is back in the return. I am the one who rails. Look at the deal. Ultimate value. The best pricing conceivable. With a builder's combo meal, $4.995, and all of your other related items are at good price points. So check it out. That's maf-arms.com, and you can use promotional code FUDBusters or promotional code RATMAN if you want a discount. So check it out. Check it out.
Check out.
Check out.
Go to the store and add to the cart before you check out.
All right, next up, this is an interesting one. That Ninth Circle's case, Yukitake v. Lopez, which is a Hawaii case, finally got a good decision out of the Ninth Circus. Argued 2 years ago. I remember we were talking about this back when that was happening. Yep. And we got a good recap from Kostas. At issue in this case are two laws. One, a Hawaii law, which provides a very narrow time window where you can get a handgun after you get the permit. It's
essentially you go to the police and you get your handgun purchase coupon, but it expires in 10 days. So you have to buy the gun within those 10 days.
Yeah, you have to find a gun.
It's waiting periods, but even stupider somehow.
Yeah, it's like a bizarre exploding waiting period.
Right.
And it's like, so you have to get your purchase coupon permit to buy this thing they don't want you to buy, so naturally disincentivizing the hell out of local stores selling it. And they're like, all right, here's your coupon, good luck. Right? Go find one. So you wind up with a Taurus or something. They also challenged another section to the extent that it requires gun owners within 5 days of acquiring a firearm to physically bring the gun to a police station for inspection. So there's multiple exploding windows on this law, right? They didn't challenge the whole background check process. Instead, they challenged a provision that voids the permit within 10 days, later 30, if you don't buy the gun within that time limit. Applies only to handguns, blah, blah, blah. Geez, Costas, you're too granular.
Yo, what the fuck is this guy's problem? Is he a lawyer or something?
Some kind of Greek. Do you know what happened in this case?
Yeah. I can just jump into it if you want.
But yeah, so there was a lot of different moving pieces because the Ninth Circuit had very terrible decisions previously. And so it kind of set up a weird little checkpoint for them to go through. But the panel did manage to 2-1, so not perfectly, engage with the requisite Bruin analysis and find the regime unconstitutional. So, Ivan, what did we see there?
So the compared to some Bruin analyses that come out of the en banc Ninth Circuit, this one was good as far as I can tell. I don't really have any big complaints about it. They engaged with the way they were supposed to, and of course, if you look at either of these laws, the exploding time period to buy a gun will not have a analog because they just simply weren't that stupid back then. And God, people were much smarter in the past not to be that stupid on purpose. And certainly the requirement to have the police inspect the gun might have some analog insofar as how, but it's going to be completely different on the why. Because there were militia inspections of guns, as well as like the anti-gunners love to point to like proofing laws as Like it's like the one time the government ever required an inspection or a permit or some paperwork for a gun was to make sure the gun didn't explode whenever it was bought in Spain. Because the Spanish guns had a certain reputation around the time of the founding, but that's good because they didn't shake that reputation. However, they'll point to these sorts of laws as being analogous, but at most you're getting the how, you're not getting the why, because the why was so people had guns that were safe, that
worked. Yeah,
like that. It was safe for them to shoot stuff with.
Yeah,
here
for the person behind the trigger.
Right here, they're trying to keep you from having a gun at all, which is a very different sort of why. Yep. But the analysis was pretty good there. They specifically touched on like the again deeply facially unserious argument that Hawaii brought up that there isn't a right to acquire arms. And unfortunately, the Ninth Circuit at several different points en banc has like sort of gone along with it doesn't say you have a right to buy them,
which is insane. Right.
This panel, when analyzing these particular laws, has done us the favor of letting the Ninth Circuit go ahead and reverse that here whenever they elect to take it en banc. But at least for the time being, right, they're going to be do the serious thing of saying, obviously you have a right to acquire the guns.
Well, even the Fourth Circuit recognizes that,
right?
Like, come on, but it's wild, and the majority opinion is, I mean, we've seen this so many times, right, where it's scathing of the other side, and this is a good one. We would not decline to apply any First Amendment scrutiny to laws imposing special temporal or procedural restrictions on purchases of available copies of expressive works merely on the ground that the plaintiff was ultimately untimely able to,
ultimately able
merely
to
obtain, merely on the ground that the plaintiff was ultimately able to obtain access to the work. So that's, say the defendant is saying, right, but they could just do it again. And keep trying. And the way I misread that at first is untimely, but that also does make sense. Because how can you right? There's been First Amendment cases about, permits for performances and things like that. And those are very narrow, and they have to be like extraordinarily limited. And never, ever content specific. Well, this only targets certain types of firearms, right? And it's only the most useful firearms that, according to the Supreme Court. I think they're wrong. I think the Draco is the most useful firearm for self-defense. But anyway, it's all just, they're being silly billies, in my opinion. They're being silly billies. But yeah, like you said, it's always nice to see a good decision out of the Ninth Circuit, just so you can watch how the en banc court chews its own cheeks raw.
This gets brought up, every time they do this, but since Heller, the Ninth Circuit en banc has an undefeated record of upholding gun laws. They've it's not for want of gun laws to analyze, because I think it's been like 60 cases, something like that are Second Amendment challenges or Second Amendment adjacent at the very least, and every single time the guns loses from the Ninth Circuit, which I'm not going to stand here and say that they're wrong. They wear dresses, right? They're special people with special dresses, which means
they're lawyers wearing dresses, yes.
Right. But there's never been one law that just went a little too far and you were like, a perfect record of upholding them is interesting.
It makes perfect sense. Guns are bad.
Yeah. I know we've talked about it before on the show, but I think the Supreme Court and Congress should put their heads together, and we should just shut down the Ninth Circus until we can figure out what the hell is going on.
Just turn them off.
Just flip the whole circuit off because they can't do it right.
Yeah, you guys, what's going on? We're gonna put you in a re-education camp, okay? Speaking of bad circuits, Ivan, what's the Seventh Circuit doing? Right, because these are not arms. Right?
Yes, those are not arms.
These are not arms because their barrels are short.
They're too short to be an arm, actually.
They're too big to be a pistol, but too small to be a rifle.
Yeah.
And so they're not arms.
Yes, of course. So the Seventh Circuit dealt with a SBR case, and I think it was 3 Biden appointees on the panel. So like, oh no!
Final boss, like Dark Souls mode of gun litigation.
GTAG has a pretty decent article here. If you scroll down, they had 3 main points they listed, and I think that's sort of the easiest way for people taking notes at home to understand it. If you scroll up just a little bit, those were the 3.
Oh, there these 3?
Yeah, so those were the 3 things that they really hung their hat on in this case.
Oh, Rush.
We've seen each of them before, and they're all deeply unserious. So the first one is that because SBRs are more concealable, they're more likely to be used in crime, and this means they aren't arms. Heller and Bruin said what an arm is, and actually none of that analysis had anything to do with whether or not it's more likely to be used in crime.
Also, the gun that Heller liked the most was the most concealable possible gun.
In Heller, in completely clear terms, right? This wasn't ambiguous in Heller. They came out and said it. Handguns are going to be the most useful for criminals. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. That's not a part of it. They didn't. It's not like they included the analysis. They specifically disposed of it from the analysis of what is an arm. But whatever. That's not a big deal. I wouldn't worry about that too much. Openly, flagrantly defying the Supreme Court generally works out pretty good, unfortunately. But the second point, right? We've heard this one about 1 million times. I think this is one that the Ninth Circuit actually invented after Heller, even that SBRs are more powerful than handguns while still being concealable, which makes them uniquely dangerous.
This is something that I've heard from AUSAs repeatedly in my career, and every time I'm like, citation, and they never do.
Well, you know what they unusual. Cite? Right?
You know what they cite? Other times AUSAs have said that.
And you've gotten away with it because it's like this flawed interest balancing reliant version of something the Ninth Circuit was able to get away with misunderstanding about Heller's. It's like 3 misunderstanding deeps, guys. It's really hard to keep up with this misunderstandingception. But they take it that if a arm is either dangerous or unusual, they can ban it. Or if you can join those terms to be a gun that is unusually dangerous, right? Uniquely dangerous, well, that means you can ban it because the dangerousness is so unique that the gun itself is different than the other guns that are just like it, which is not what the court said. Also, this is an analog dealing with the carrying of firearms, so we're already like 3 steps down the stupid tube. But several courts have invented this sort of like uniquely dangerous nonsense. But again, if we look back at the first example and we consider what Heller said, right? The most concealable handguns that are most often used in crimes, unequivocally, right? They're arms. Just plain and simple.
Lie at the core. It was the language of Heller. Lie at the core of the Second Amendment's protection.
If you have a gun that is less concealable than that and used in crime less often than that, should that be an arm or not an arm? Or does it not matter? Or does those factors not matter?
Because it doesn't matter because the gun loses.
The correct answer is those factors just do not matter at all. But even if they were to matter, that's more lawful than a pistol and should be okay. But no, they're uniquely dangerous. And it's because they're more powerful than handguns, right? Which gets into the questions that were sort of critical to the pistol brace cases, where how is it more powerful?
Yeah, what is power? Define
having
that.
A stock makes it more powerful? I don't think powerful is the right word.
Because look at the bottom one here.
Right.
That's a 9mm AR-15. How is that more powerful?
And somehow taking the stock off makes it an arm again.
Yeah.
Or if it had a 16.001 inch barrel, it's an arm again.
Yeah.
But if the barrel was, or how about this? If it's a bullpup, right? A bullpup 16.001 inch barrel gun, it will be smaller in overall length than that.
Yeah, but it's good.
So it's more concealable.
Well, it's because guns that are awkward to reload are not useful in crime.
Interesting.
So, and also, but the historical firearms regulations support restrictions on concealable weapons, right? All of these historical regulations that expressly said we do not apply to anyone that is a traveler or who is on a journey or who basically only if we don't like the way you look. And by the way, those laws, you know what the best part is? In the founding era, which is the only era we're supposed to be looking at, the word gun never, as consistently as English was at the founding era, right? The word gun was never used to apply to pistols.
And you may have seen the same thing as me, but I was watching a British YouTube channel recently that touched on the same thing, and they had an old English dictionary that specifically said gun is long arm, pistol is small arm.
Yep.
Two different words.
Pistol was specifically there was, because I've done a lot of research for a client recently in another case, but there was 3 categories of pistol at the founding, and there was the pistol that was considered gentlemanly and manly, and that was a saddle side pistol, right? That was normally worn upon the hip, outside of the clothing. And then there was a pocket pistol, right? Which was to be concealed in a pocket. And then below that, there was a muff pistol, which was small enough to be held into the language was a lady's muff, which is not what you awful modern people are thinking. It was the little hand warmer. But they would say concealing a pistol, right? They would never refer to guns. So they would, on their own terms, on the definitions of the words at the time, none of the regulations on concealing pistols would have applied to a shoulder-fired weapon.
Yes.
Because they understood pistols very narrowly, and because they were less common at the time, because they were still using propellants that really liked to be in a long tube, right?
Right. And when they came across these restrictions, right? Again, if we're to try and find a hook in Bruin, right? There are some restrictions on some sorts of carriage of some sorts of concealable or concealed, not concealable, but concealed specifically weapons, right? Some of these things do exist. Did this analysis say they were or weren't arms? Oh, they were arms. Very interesting. Okay, so did these regulations outright entirely ban the possession of them?
No.
Oh no, they didn't do that, did they? That's very interesting. Oh, but these regulations placed a really heavy tax. It was originally meant to be prohibitively expensive, but these days isn't actually that bad. They did that?
No, it was usually a fine of a day's pay.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah. But I did find one law where you were not to be selling concealable pistols. That law was on the book for 3 or 4 years around in the colonial era. So, and it was specifically directed at keeping them away from Native Americans. But I wouldn't worry about that. That will totally, help uphold SBR regulations somehow.
And so again, we have another instance of a circus court doing something just fundamentally unserious, where
being silly goosies.
At the very least, right? Why don't you just throw everybody the bone of saying, all right, their arms are just not protected because they're big, bad, and spooky, scary, instead of this, well, they're not arms because they're big, bad, spooky, scary. Because it's, again, right? We've given you all the examples. How is a pistol an arm and a rifle's an arm, but something that lands in the middle of them is not? Because it's not as in fact, right, it's concealable like a rifle, and it's powerful less than a rifle. But not an arm, because it's less powerful than the rifle that's an arm, while being as bulky as the rifle that's an arm.
I won't worry about it. Speaking of arms, guys, we have something new to show you, and it's traditionalarms.com. Guys, this is Florida-made, zero compromise holsters and gear. Traditionalarms.com is a new partner with the show. It is run by my best friend Gino and his. Oh, look at there he is! Look at Gino. That's him shooting.
He was shooting fast.
Yeah, that's the other guy. That's his buddy. That's the guy that makes these holsters. They are made in Florida, and I will tell you, I had the TRX Arms sidecar. I really liked it, but it was a little bit big. I have been exclusively carrying in one of these holsters for about 2 years now. And also, most of my friends carry in these Traditional Arms holsters. They're amazing. Just check them out. Give it a try. They're not that expensive, so you may as well. And you're going to use code Fudbusters, if you want the credit to go to me, or you can use Ratman for the credit to go to Ivan. But check them out, guys, traditionalarms.com. And while you're there, also go to fflpaymentprocessing.com. Get your credit card shit right. Get right with God and money or something. You save money, right? Save money. Show us to your local FFL. Be like, look, you're leaving money on the table, you stupid fuck. What's wrong with you? You want to just give that money away, idiot?
Do you know who takes that money? Credit card Americans.
Yeah, go ahead and ask. When you call up FFL Payments, ask who gets the money. But yeah, FFLPaymentProcessing.com. Check it out. Okay, next, finally back to the stories. We have Franklin Armory. I don't know if you guys remember long ago the churro bullet, the Reformation or whatever it was. Franklin Arms Reformation. They finally won. After all this time, you guys remember the 300 blackout churro launcher?
That thing's so old, right? Carl and Ian were still best friends.
Oh no. It's true. Yeah, it was a wonderful keyholer. Back in SHOT Show 2018. But it's kind of cool, I guess.
It's a straight rifling gun, if you guys remember that, where they were going to design a drag stabilized bullet for it, and I don't think those ever actually came out. But you could shoot regular bullets through it too. It's just that they would have straight rifling, a twist rate of 0 in infinity. And as a result, they would tumble immediately after leaving the barrel. And Franklin would sometimes claim that it would shoot 4-inch groups at 100 yards. And I think this actually meant at one point they shot a 4-inch group at 100 yards, and it may have been like a 1 or 2 round group, and I'd believe that. But
2 rounds too, like
that. In actuality, right? People who had tested it, it doesn't group at all because it doesn't even begin to stabilize. Right? It might as well be smooth bore, and the grooves were just put there to sort of make it so it's not a pistol and not a shot, or rather, not a rifle and not a shotgun. So done as more of an interesting legal quirk as anything, which Franklin is known for, and they certainly shouldn't be knocked for that. But anybody saying that this is like a serious defend yourself gun is
silly goose.
It's kind of silly.
Yeah. But hey, I mean, but maybe now that they're allowed to play with it again, they'll actually do the drag stabilized projectile.
Right.
Do you believe that'll work?
I bet you could make it work.
I bet you could make it work with enough money.
Now, I can remember thinking this way back when this was new, right? Is what they should do is they make the grooves much narrower and make them rounded, right? So they're not sharp angle, which would be hard to manufacture, whatever. I don't really care. But what they should do is make this thing in I didn't imagine 350 Legend. I imagined like 458 Bushmaster back when this was new or whatever. But make it so that the bullets are 55 grain 223s that are in rifled sabos.
Oh yeah,
because you'd get your accuracy.
That would be pretty funny.
You'd get your accuracy, and you could have it in a short barrel or whatever, and that would be the answer to the question nobody asked. But it would be cool.
Everyone, check it out! I did it.
Everybody's looking at you, kind of funny. I mean, 300 blackout, but neck down to 223.
Yeah, we should do it. Yeah, do it.
Sabot, 300 blackout, Sabot to 223.
Dude, that's like 22 TCM Magnum.
Whoa.
All right. Next up, guys, another state laws, man. The Alabama House Committee approves Glock switch ban.
These guys are worried about the youth shooting too fast.
Yeah, they got these teens and they're going too fast. They're shooting more than one shot per day. It passed unanimously in the Senate last week. Alabama has one of the highest rates of firearm deaths in the nation.
Yeah, and this will solve it.
Yeah, to make the Glock switch more illegal. What did the police say? Police said Glock switches were used in a notable Las Vegas in Birmingham in September. How come we didn't hear about that?
I think we did. It's just that it happens often enough, and the sort of people that it happens with, it's just sort of like normal at this point.
Yeah, it's not an actual notable Las Vegas. It's something else.
It's the sort of sound of the urban jungle that Joe Biden referred to. he said these
Stop
things
it.
before, he said it before he was senile.
He also said something about hyper predatory people.
He did say that.
Joe was a bad dude, you
I
know.
think he was referring to the Glock switches because they're hyper predatorial.
The bill is one of two that are nearly identical. Governor Kay Ivey, which is a real name, exposed her support for the measure at a news conference with law enforcement and mayors from the state. It's so fucking gay. I'm sorry. This is the most soft cocked.
We're keeping the public safe.
It's just like it's the art and politics of doing nothing. Look at these completely flaccid individuals congratulating one another.
You know they're going to go home and watch their wife get railed, and they're going to feel like they did something good today.
Look at them.
It's tough.
You voted for these people, and look at this. Is something. This is a grudge I will hold for the rest of my life. No one in Alabama is capable of wearing a suit correctly. They all look like this. They all do. It is not a serious state. It's no serious. No serious. All right. You know what is serious? Patriot Patch Company, guys. Hold on. I got a new one. Fresh. Sam already opened it.
I wonder if Patriot Patch could make Draco grips.
Yeah. Somebody's going to have to at this point. I got a new one. Yeah, this is Sam's new thing. She opens the Patriot Patch bags before I do. What's it going to look like? Short-tempered guy in honor of Saint Patrick.
Whoa.
That's a big one, too. Look at the size. That's bigger than a full paw. He's got a P90. That's not an arm. And a surpriser. And of course, with the Patch of the Month Club, you get the art. This is the art that the owner guy, sent to the Patch Man to get did. Oh, whoa. I got a bonus this time. Dangerous to go alone. Take this. Yeah, take this. And that's an AR-15.
In case there's any helicopters.
Yeah, an AR-15. And you also get a sticker. That's a great little mood booster to get in the mail once a month for the modest price of just $15. That's it. It's just $15. And you're supporting a great company who's been the longest time supporter of this show, run by the guy who previously ran this show. Really good guy. Use promotional code TWIG10, that's TWIG10, to get yourself a discount and show them your support of supporting us. And that's important. Whatever you do, make sure that we benefit.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing that you can do for me. Keep me in mind when you're shopping. Anything else for the boys, Mr. Iveman?
I don't know if there is. There was a new FUD blast.
We did a FUD blast. It was good. We've got like 20 more recorded. And we are overloading mags by being really demanding with editing them. Because it is getting hard. We have a lot of cool stuff in the pipeline. But the nice thing about, well, you can be blessed with a lot to do, right? And a lot of work to get done. But then you get stressed and you can't do all of the same things that you want to do. So help us out. Join our Patreons to help us be able to spend more time doing this and less time on the non-fun work stuff. Like to be able to spend more time focusing on actively working gun law and covering gun law. So donations to either of us help us do that. And yeah, whatever. You need to subscribe. You need to do whatever it is that you do on the podcast, listeners. I've actually recently found out that most people who watch the show do not look at our YouTube channel. They
That's
just
kind of interesting.
they're like on Apple Podcasts or whatever.
They can't even see the rat on Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, so I'd really recommend you guys to go and check out Fud Busters on YouTube and Fud Blasters on YouTube, and take us a look there. But until next time, guys, that's it for today. We will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
This podcast has been a production of the Firearms Radio Network. For more, visit firearmsradio.net.